Dave Vaughton, MTC.
Eric Hughes, City of Pleasant Hill.
Steve Kersavan, City of Brentwood.
Jerry Fay, Contra Costa County.
Tom Harayas, Tri-Delta Transit.
Ahmed Abu Ali, City of Antioch.
Chad Smalley, City of Richmond.
Jeremy Lokirko, City of Walnut Creek.
John Cunningham, Contra Costa County.
Zachary Sharp, Caltrans Planning.
Thank you. Since we started the meeting, this is the time for public comment for any item that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have summary actions that we're being asked to approve. I assume everyone has read through them. Is there any discussion? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar. Oh, no, summary of actions?
Second.
Hold on, we have an extra
This show was getting on nervous.
Yes. What? Get that gavel out. What, you want me to call order here? Come on.
Yeah.
With this motley crew? Who's coming in late?
I refuse to answer in advance.
Should I say let the record?
Deidre Heitman Bar.
Thank you. Consent calendar. There's the attendance log, the quarterly project status report, and the funding summary. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. What did I forget?
Summary of that. Steve started that.
I heard a second.
Yeah, but Sure or you?
You're driving Matt out. Let's go on to item 4, project monitoring. Stephanie, are you? There you are.
Yep, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. This next item is for informational. It's an informational item, so no action is needed. Just wanted to let you guys know there are 3 monthly monitoring reports in your packet, pages 4.3 to 4.10. Since the last TCC meeting in June, we've actually moved a few OBAG projects from fiscal year 15-16 to fiscal year 16-17 per sponsor's request. So now, therefore, there are 10 fiscal year 15-16 projects totaling $10 million. These projects, E76, are due November 1st of this year, so that's just 2 months away. So just a reminder that to submit them on time to not risk losing funding. And we ask that you guys continue to send us updates for your projects monthly so we can monitor them accurately. And we'll take questions if you have any.
Is the only fashion in which you get an update is if we send it to you?
Yeah. So if you look at, for example, page 4-5, we normally ask for the field review, NEPA, right-of-way cert, and the E76 request, and provide us with dates, an estimate or actual if you've already have done these steps.
I will get you an update. The Brentwood project actually done, so.
Okay.
I guess I missed the boat on the update, but I'll get you an update.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Well, I guess we have our information. Next item up, I think Ishan was going to talk to us about the recommended project list to MTC for inclusion in the RTP.
So everybody should have
11 by 17 handout that they can read. As you all know, MTC issued a call for projects on April 29. On May 8th, I think, we issued our call to all the cities and transit operators to develop a comprehensive list of projects to submit for the RTP. And as you all know, to receive federal or state funds, the projects, if they are affecting air quality, if their capacity increasing, they really need to be individually listed in the RTP. The RTP will contain programmatic categories for projects that do not impact the capacity of the transportation system, such as pavement rehab projects, safety projects, pedestrian bicycle projects, and so on. Some of these projects, they don't have to be listed. There will be a general category in the RTP to cover them. So over the past 3 months, I've been working with you and the RTPCs to come up with the project lists. We did receive recommendations from the RTPCs, and those were included in your packet. We plan to take this list to the Planning Committee for review in September, as well as the authority, and we will ask for final action in October in case there are some minor tweaking we need to do. The reason you have this handout in front of you is since we've gotten the input from the RTPCs, we first cross-checked them with the CTPL to make sure that whatever was submitted is included in the CTPL, and we added a column on this list that says CTPL ID, so you'll know if you're in the CTPL or not. If you're not in the CTPL now, we will add you as part of this process. And also we wanted to make sure the naming that we're using is consistent with the CTPL. What you see here in green, which I would like to go over, is the changes that happened since the RTPC submitted your input. We cross-checked this list with the information that was entered into MTC database. We found new projects that were entered that were not submitted by the RTPCs. Some projects had some revisions to it. So I'd like to go through them, and hopefully today I'd like to get your concurrence to make these changes to the list before we take it to the Planning Committee. So on the committed list, the first green cell you see there is Contra Costa Boulevard. We just ensured that the name is consistent with the description, so there was a change to the limits, and now they're both consistent. The second green cell on the first page on the committed is just, we ended up entering the information for eBART, so we put ourselves as a sponsor as opposed to BART. You're okay? So tell me if you're not okay with any of these changes, just raise your hand. Maybe that's one way we can do it. The third, if you go to the second page, Main Street Bypass. This is a project in Oakley. Originally, it was on the financially constrained list. Since after the RTPC submitted the list, we found out it's actually much cheaper project and it's fully funded. So we moved it to the committed list at the request of the City of Oakley. The next one, Hillcrest, we just changed the limits based on input from the city. Sand Creek is the limit instead of Balfour Road on that one. The next one, there was a project in Danville with minor change to the cost. Used to be $0.4 million, now it's a $1 million project. And, oops, sorry. And these are the changes on the committed list. So they're pretty minor, I think. On the financially constrained list, the first page has no changes. The second, it says at the bottom, page 2 of 6. We got information from the city that it should say South Main Street as opposed to North Main, so we fixed that. Page 3 of 6, we got information This is the city project in Oakley that got moved into the committed list, so we noted that. The one after is a project that we missed. This is the ICM on Highway 4. It was not recommended by the RTPCs. We actually have a grant, and it's going to become a real project soon, so we added it to the financially constrained list. Since Oakley moved out their project, we just used the money from Oakley basically to use up the capacity in Transplan area. So there is no net change in the numbers. So that's one significant change, and I'd like to know if everybody's okay with that.
Hisham, sorry, just one error that I noticed. On the financially constrained list, page 2 of 6, the second project under Pleasant Hill, complete streets improvements on Contra Costa Boulevard, Taylor to Gregory. It's actually Pleasant Hill Road, not Contra Costa Boulevard.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Just a minor change on the title. Everything else looks good.
Thank you. Okay. Shall I continue with my changes then?
I had a quick question. Hisham?
Yes.
By adding the SR4 ICM, is that because there's funding limitations? Does that somehow, are we in jeopardy of exceeding our
No,
estimate there?
We're still within the 2.3
Okay.
billion total, yes.
Thank you.
And the reason for that is because Oakley moved a project out of the financially constrained to the committed. But that's a good question. Okay,
One last question on that. So can you tell a little bit more about the SR4 ICM? You say you already have a grant for it. What kind of money?
We have $200,000 from the feds to study the improvements. The ICM stands for Integrated Corridor Mobility. It's a similar project to what we're doing on I-80, where it's RAM metering, adaptive RAM metering, incident management. It's basically a traffic management, an advanced traffic management system for the freeway. So once we open Highway 4, it doesn't get clogged again because of the traffic. So we think it's very important to do this project. You know, it's not going to be as expensive as I-80. We're expecting it to be around $11-12 million. But, you know, this is just a very preliminary estimate.
And is part of the study going to include?
And the study limits are from I-80 to 160. But, you know, most of the work will probably be in East County.
Okay. And I assume that you'll be bringing that at some point to WCTAC and the tax.
Yeah, I mean, we have not started the study yet.
Right.
I think we will form a TAC for that study that makes up all subregions impacted, but that has not started yet.
Okay.
Jack Hall will be the project manager on that. So moving on to the page 4 of 6 on the financially constrained list, there was wrong information in the description of I-80 San Pablo Dam Road that we corrected. Page 5 has no changes, as well as page 6. So really the main change on the financially constrained list is just adding that Highway 4 ICM project. And again, that we're not really exceeding our limits. Now the next list, the vision list, page 1, the other projects that was missing, was not submitted by Transpac, is the carpool gap closure through the 680-24 interchange. So we folded it in the I-680 operational improvements. So that's, you know, I think these two projects will be linked. We want to make sure it is submitted. And I think there is a plan to study how to close that gap now by MTC, and as well with funding from CCTA as well. You will see all the BART projects, if we move to the next page, all the BART projects were actually deleted and consolidated, not all of them, I'm sorry.
Can I just explain in my defense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me just say, they're all combined and shown at the last page on the vision list. They're not really deleted. They're combined, and the numbers there reflect the needs for the whole Bay Area, not just Contra Costa. So,
Yeah,
Deidre, go ahead.
First of all, thank you, Hisham. So, Dave, you can close your ears if you don't want to hear this, but every 4 years we have this issue with MTC because we're more than one county. 4 years ago, we took our projects, we split them up by county, then we split them up by subregion, but this time around we just couldn't do that, frankly. And so we thought that MTC was going to be handling our regional projects, but no, we had to get them here to cover the outreach in the Title VI, and so that's why I just took the old ones off and put these on. So the ones that you see, 97 through 101, will be and they don't have a vision list. So we're submitting them in MTC as financially constrained with absolutely basically no funding. That's not really true. We have funding for some of them, but
we're unconstrained.
We're not asking, other than the one item that you have in the committed list, we're not asking for funds at this point in this process. We just need them in the RTP.
Okay.
And I've requested from MTC staff that we figure this out once and for all, because every 4 years, BART anyway is scrambling around trying to figure out which CMA, and it's ridiculous in my opinion. So thank you for your indulgence on this.
All right. Next on the list, I'm still on page 2 of 6. We got the input from the Bypass Authority on the limits, so we reflected that on line number 29, new number 29, and also updated cost estimates. And by the way, changing the cost here doesn't matter because this is not part of the financially constrained. And then the next page 3, again, this is actually, this is because we cross-checked what the RTPC submitted with what's in MTC database. We found 5 new projects. So we added them. There were 2 in Antioch and 3 in Oakley. And, they're in the vision list, so it's really not affecting our financially constrained list. The next 4 changes are, again, related to BART. Again, they were consolidated at the end. So moving on to the next page, 4 of 6. I want to bring up, 4 of 6. I want to bring up this issue. If you look on line item number 60 and line item number 65, these were proposed by WICTAC, and they were bike pit projects in El Cerrito and bike pit projects in Richmond. We already have a general bike pit project in the financially constrained list, so there is no necessity to list them like this, and I'm suggesting we delete them from the list if you're okay with that. We have few more like this on the next page, next 2 pages. Line item number 72. Again, Richmond submitted a project to complete the Richmond Bay Trail. The county submitted projects on the last page to complete the Bay Trail. And WICTAC submitted the project number 92. Project number 83, I think. Does it say 91? So 91 and 92, they're completing the Bay Trail, one in Richmond and one in the unincorporated county. But if you look in the notes, I think we say, if you look on project number 83, WICTAC has a general project that says complete Bay Trail, Richmond Greenway, and Ohlone Greenway, basically all the trails in West County. So there is no need to separate them, and I'm suggesting we delete them, if that's okay.
With regard to the Bay Trail and Greenway, I think I agree with that approach,
Okay.
Provided the funding has been summed the way that we presented. I have more questions on the change to the El Cerrito and Richmond Bike Ped projects. Again, moving to the financially constrained. The difference there being that financially constrained has a funding target. So I want to make sure that the full estimated cost for both of those jurisdictions was added to that programmatic category.
Well, that we cannot do. I mean, that will make us exceed our target. We cannot sum the numbers and add them there. But what I've been explaining to people is, if you look in the financially constrained list, there is about $97 million worth in that bed bike category. And between now and the next update to the RTP in 4 years, you're not going to have $97 million worth of bed bike projects countywide. It's just not going to happen. So I think we're covering our bases with that number. If you don't feel comfortable deleting them, we can keep them. It's fine. It's just, it's repetitious, I think.
I agree it's repetitious. I guess the rub comes in where if the RTP is viewed as its own distinct thing and it's only about the 4-year cycle and the amount of funding anticipated to come in, I think that logical works. Where we start to get tripped up is that this idea that an extension or an additional measure, we would turn to the vision list to formulate, to begin to populate an expenditure plan. And the concern I have with this is that we listed these items this way in order to demonstrate the level of need for those kinds of projects. And I'm afraid that we sort of lose that if we put an artificial cap on it and move it into financially constrained. And then it doesn't really get fair viewing when we're talking about expanding that pool. So I guess that's where sort of the process breaks down for me.
If assuming the measure passes, because it's going to pass hopefully before the new RTP is adopted, and Dave, correct me, jump in whenever you want. When the measure passes, one of the first things we will be doing is making sure all the projects and programs in the new measure are included in the financially constrained list. So that number, the 97, if we have another 100 million in the new measure, it'll be 197 or something like that. But I see your point. I'm okay with leaving it if you want to just demonstrate the needs as opposed to specific projects.
That's sort of what I'm intending to do with that line item. But I'm open to, I guess I'd like to hear what other jurisdictions how they're approaching this. The other consideration is provided that the CTPL accurately shows this, perhaps CTPL is a more appropriate place to demonstrate the need on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis. And so,
yeah, everything you see here will be in the CTPL. That is right.
I just had more of a procedural question. There were several projects that were kind of wrapped in that fashion that just kind of went into the CCTA category, and I appreciate that. I don't want to echo the point necessarily, but more of the question is who, from a local jurisdiction perspective, who's going to be the cheerleader on some of these local projects? Is it where currently it's very clear that the project sponsor is the local jurisdiction and it's their project and they're taking ownership of that project? If in some cases there are regional routes or there's roadway maintenance monies that go into more of a CCTA pot, the way that I'm understanding, those monies are still available for the local jurisdiction to tap into. But then the question is how does it still maintain its priority with CCTA as the project sponsor?
Let me see if I understand the question. I can tell you the mechanics of, remember, the goal here is to make sure that you're able to compete for federal and state funds. As long as you have a category for, let's say, local streets maintenance with a decent amount of dollar amount, you're able to go and compete for pavement jobs, funding for pavement jobs. Now, if the limit on that category is low, what will happen is once you get funding, you got to enter the project into the TIP, right? MTC, for every TIP listing, keeps track of what RTP ID it relates to. So let's say you only have $50 million or $5 million, and you end up, every time you go to compete for funding, you say, my project is in the RTP under this RTP ID. And if you reach that cap or exceed it, that's when we have a problem, okay? But the goal of this is not to go champion for bike bed or local. The goal, as I understand it, is to make sure you're enabled to go after federal and state funds and not be precluded because you're not in the RTP. That's the last thing we want to do.
And just to kind of go on that, I appreciate that. As I'm looking at the financially constrained list, for example, Local Streets Maintenance Improvement Program has a certain dollar amount that's tapped into that. Regional Bikes and PEDs, another good example. What happens when we don't use $97 million?
Nothing.
But no, I understand nothing happens, but does that's precluded another jurisdiction that has a project on the vision list from potentially being considered on the financially constrained list? Is that correct? Because my understanding is that we can't exceed
That's right.
the dollar amount. Yeah. So to some degree, I'd like to think that the numbers that CCTA is plugging in here has some sort of correlation with these other projects that have been kind of grouped under this main header, because otherwise we're unfortunately then capping another project from moving forward.
Well, that's a good point. However, when we calculated the $97 million, we looked at how much funding. Financially constrained means the cost you put here should be equal to the amount of funding you expect from existing sources. So we looked at our Measure J, we looked at existing fund sources, and this money is actually the programs in Measure J. It's not money that you can take and use on pavement, rehab, so this is really specific to bike. That's how we came up with the 97.
I get that, and I'm not disputing that, but I'm saying if there's another bike and ped project in the vision list that, I guess what you're telling me is that you have considered just the bike and peds that are on the vision list and said they don't necessarily need to be called out specifically because they could be covered under the financially constrained. Okay.
That's right. Exactly. Did I say anything wrong?
No, that's pretty good. I guess just to close the loop, we want things as programmatic categories as it increases flexibility, and we also don't see the need for the regional project list to have every little project. If these are non-capacity increasing projects, they should be lumped into a programmatic category. And last time we had a very extensive project list because people didn't comply with the requirement, and this time we may do some housekeeping if we are getting a very extensive list that should be bundled into programmatic categories.
I'm trying. So what I think the end of the discussion here is the trails, we're going to combine it into one on the vision list, complete the green. So that's fine. And I think because you feel strongly about the other two, we're going to leave them. Okay, and I think that summarizes all the changes. And I'd like to I don't want to be the one who recommend these changes. I want TCC to make that role, please. So if you're okay with it, if we make these changes, we're going to end up with about 210 projects as opposed to 220, excluding the BART ones. 45 on the committed list, 88 on the financially constrained, and about 77 on the vision list. And the cost for all these projects will be about $15.3 billion, excluding the $9 billion for BART. That's region-wide.
Wasn't that $9.8 billion?
Yeah.
The 9.7.
You rounded down a little there.
I know, it actually came up to what we've been saying, which is a miracle. So can I just ask a question? So, pardon my ignorance, but why is CCTA the EBART Phase 1 sponsor?
Because we entered the
Did you-
information. If you don't, we can change it back to BART. That's not a problem.
You know, my concern is our BART board member is going to go, what? You know, when he sees
We'll
this
change
list.
it back. We don't want that. Okay.
Oh, then I move the list.
Now, before you take action, just want to let you know what the process is moving forward. Thank you first for all your work with me in the last 3 months. I know it wasn't easy, and this is not easily explainable. But the reason, we do this is because when we submit this list, we want to know what our priorities are. MTC is not asking us to do this. MTC is saying, tell us your committed and uncommitted projects. And uncommitted is the financially constrained plus the vision. And they're going to go through their evaluation process, and they're going to decide which ones meets the goals of the RTP. And they're going to decide at the end what goes in the RTP. We want to make sure we have these lists now so we can, when we go back and talk to MTC, if we see a project on the financially constrained list that didn't make it into the RTP, we want to be able to find out which one that was and why, and if there is a way, and if there is a good reason why it shouldn't be in the RTP. So that's the reason why we do the 3 lists now, even though it's not asked by MTC. We want to know what the county priority is ahead of time and not at the end. And this process really will help us in the tip development for the new measure. There will be a lot of give and take on that, and we want to know what the actual needs are. So all the projects on the financially constrained are top priority. Also, we know if we didn't limit you, the list on the vision list will be a lot more. But I think even that list has been prioritized to only think about the projects that could move forward if there is a new fund source. So you've done a lot of good prioritization that will prove helpful for us for the new sales tax measure. But the RTP process is just starting. The RTP is not going to be adopted until 2017. And there will be a lot of back and forth between us and MTC during that time.
So Isham, you would like the committee to approve the changes as you've presented them here?
That's right. Except, the only thing that we will not do is just the 2 bed bike projects. We're going to keep them the way they are. We're not going to lump them. Okay.
So move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Can I ask one question?
Go ahead.
So in inputting the projects to the MTC database, I've been told not, for example, our El Cerrito Del Norte Station Mod project Phase 1, fully funded. It's not capacity increasing, so I'm not going to submit it.
You still need to submit projects even if they're non-capacity increasing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Isham, I'd like to say thank you. I think I've seen more of you in the last 6 months than I haven't. And I can only imagine what it's like, because I was, a small segment, 1 RTPC and 1 transit operator, and I can only imagine what went on elsewhere. So
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, and if you have questions, you can always call me.
Okay, we'll go on to item 6. Martin is going to talk to us about the recommended transportation investment options.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, TCC members. I'm Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning at CCTA. And I'm here this afternoon to give you a quick update on where we are with the 2014 Countywide Transportation Plan and talk about some options that we propose to evaluate in the subsequent EIR for the CTP. So just by way of background, you'll notice it is 2015, and you'll notice the title of this project is still the 2014 CTP. We haven't changed the title yet, but we may have to do that at some point in time. Our original schedule was to adopt this thing actually during 2014, and it slipped a little into 2015. You may recall we issued a draft CTP back in August of 2014, and then we were poised to adopt a final CTP. Schedule slipped into March. We were ready to adopt it in March 2015, and we received a number of letters from a group called Public Advocates indicating they were very concerned about the setting of priorities in our CTP. And that gets into the issue of MTC guidelines and state statutes. We issued the draft final CTP indicating that our priorities were as set forth in the 2013 RTP, and that had already been adopted. However, with discussions of a transportation expenditure plan on the horizon, we were getting requests that we kind of bring the whole thing together and talk about our priorities for a transportation expenditure plan in the context of a countywide transportation plan, which of course involves this much bigger list called the Comprehensive Transportation Project List. So we've gone out, we've asked for all your input on what projects should be in the CTPL. We've got this $13.4 billion list. Based upon the 2013 RTP, 3.4 billion of that is, did I say 13.4? I'm sorry, $12.4 billion list. What's a billion here and a billion there? $12.4 billion list. And of that, based upon the 2013 RTP, 3.4 billion is funded, and that is in 2014 current dollars. That's not an escalated dollars. With looking at this transportation expenditure plan, if we were to have a new measure, half-cent sales tax, collect a whole cent for a while, and then continue the half-cent for 25 years from, say, 2017, that generates $2.3 billion in new revenues. Historically, we've had a one-to-one leveraging on programs and projects as a whole. We've had much higher leveraging on projects, of course, and much lower leveraging on programs. But if we assume one-to-one leveraging on that new $2.3 billion, we can assume we'll get another $2.3 billion in new funding. That's funding that is not in this RTP, but comes along based upon new programs. So that makes a tidy $4.6 billion in new revenues plus the 3.4 in existing revenues. We come out to about an $8 billion estimate for what we would have for projects and programs for what we're calling transportation investment options, and we're trying to avoid use of the acronym TIOs, so I'll just call them options. So in the previous SEIR for the CTP, we evaluated the NO project and we evaluated the CTPL, and there were several alternatives to the project in there that looked at the CTPL and focused on things like maximizing freeway performance, increasing transit ridership, or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But those are all based upon the assumption that we would build the entire CTPL. And if you look at our fund estimate here of $8 billion, we're obviously a few billion short of doing that. So for this next round, we propose to reissue a draft CTP, and we expect to do that in January of 2016. And that effort will be done in parallel with the development of a draft TIP, which the authority expects to release in November of this year. And the final CTP would be adopted in May of 2016, along with the final EIR and the final TIP. So the SEIR be recirculated, and if we start working now on modeling these options and figuring out what they mean environmentally, we can just make it to issuing a draft SEIR in January. So you got to start early. It takes a few months, to run the model, get all the bugs out, put together all the information, and issue an EIR. So what we want to introduce you to today are what we're calling transportation investment options A, B, and C, and tell you about the new alternatives that we want to include in our SEIR. So we did have the NO project in the previous one. We're going to continue that. And we also had the CTPL. We're going to continue that. We're adding potentially 5 new alternatives to the SEIR. The first is the 2013 RTP, and that would be the financially constrained $3.4 billion in project and program investments identified in that document. And in your packet, there's a list of the projects that are included in that on page 6.5 and 6.6. And that would essentially be our baseline, the 2013 RTP. And then we add on to that new projects and programs with investments options A, B, and C. And for lack of better terms, we've called them the community focus, the economic focus, and the environmental focus. So option A, the community focus, focuses on promoting safe, efficient, and accessible operations for all users, creating thriving local communities, investing in transportation modes that would encourage non-motorized use, transit use, improve community health. And essentially, this option, I would call it heavily transit-focused and very much capital transit improvements. You can't buy a whole lot of capital transit improvements for $2.3 billion, but we're assuming that those funds, if they were focused primarily on projects, they would be leveraged. And things like the investments on I-80 based upon the results of the current study, the investments on I-680, the extension of EBART from Antioch to Brentwood, those would be included in this alternative A. Option B is the economic focus, and it is a mix of highway and transit projects, investments that are intended to enhance job creation, giving priority to freeways, roadway projects. It includes capital, transit capital projects that serve employment centers, and it would include projects that support and improve goods movement. The economic focus option follows very closely the submittals we received from the RTPCs. So it will, if you did put a project in it, you should be able to see it in this investment option B. And then investment option C, the environmental focus, it's primarily focused on reducing the generation of greenhouse gases, and it is more heavily focused on programs than on projects. So we shift from capital investments to programs. There are numerous countywide programs in this alternative, many of them related to local streets, pedestrians, and roads, PDA-related programs, Safe Transportation for Children. There are a couple of new programs in here, a revolving fund for programs that address displacement of low-income households from PDAs and other transit-rich locations, and a program that would be based upon the regional advanced mitigation program so that we can pool our investments in mitigation and purchase those upfront in advance so that when we do need mitigations, we can use this existing pool. The authority plans to discuss this information with our Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee on September 14th. We are going to do some preliminary model runs with this information and hope to report it out on September 28th and share that with the EPAC, and we'll also share it with the Regional Transportation Planning Committees. And the information we generate will be fairly big picture indications of how the model responds to these various alternatives in terms of vehicle miles traveled, vehicle hours of delay, average speeds, and we'll try to show which way the needle moves relative to a baseline that will probably be the RTP, the 2013 RTP, or possibly the committed of the RTP, and say what does this do to those metrics, and then that's kind of an exercise where we can run the model, see if it works, check the coding. The modeling consultant for this is Fair and Peers, and they'll be generating this information. After September, we're going to start doing what's called post-processing. That's looking a little more closely at each alternative, trying to do things that the model can't do in the way of figuring out what these focus programs have in the way of effect on modal split, and all of that will be done after we've run the big model. And hopefully this information will help with development of a draft transportation investment program, which transportation expenditure plan rather, which the authority is going to issue in November. And the SCIR is going to pick up that alternative and include it in the January draft SCIR. So that's a fourth kind of transportation investment option that we're going to call the draft TEP. And we issue the draft in January. At that same time, the authority will release a final draft TEP, and we'll look at that and see how it compares to the draft TEP. We'll make any changes and can approach May with a final SCIR, final CTP, and final TEP for authority adoption. And this is all tentative, could change at any time, but that's kind of the direction we're headed in. So I think what we'd like to hear from you is what you think about these alternatives, and if you have any comments or questions that you would like to have us take to the Planning Committee as they're going to see this item in September. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, so I have several questions. So you have a transit capital in one and transit operating in another, but not the two together?
Well, the two together would be in option B, because there is transit capital in option B. Option B is not highway focused. It's a mix of transit and it's a mix of highway and transit capital projects, and there would be
in
transit
the economic
programs.
focus one?
Yeah, the economic focus. Yeah, option B. The RTPCs did submit transit capital projects, and we're still designing the specifics of these, but these are the general themes.
Okay, well, I guess I don't see the transit focus in number B, but So my next question is then, did you say that one of these alternatives includes the projects that the RTPCs put forward as part of the
That's
RTP?
correct.
And that's which one?
That's option B, the economic focus.
Okay, so what about the proposals that the transit operators put forward that weren't accepted by the RTPCs? Does that get reflected anywhere in this?
Those would be in either A or C.
Okay. And then it seems to me completely lacking in PDA support, and maybe it's just not called out, but I mean, I see improved bus service to PDAs, complete streets PDAs, but I don't see actually a PDA focused, like your TLC program, for example.
We haven't listed out all the specific programs at this point.
Okay, it just seems
and the
like an
programs-
obvious
Yeah.
missing piece there.
The-
If you're adhering to the, you know, the SB 375.
Right.
or whatever.
And the programs, that I think that information is yet to come. But I think each of these would have some investment in PDAs, and probably the heaviest would be in option C.
Okay. So one thing to consider, and I know I've said this in different forums, is that when you, for example, like with the TLC or the OBAC program, you split it up 4 ways, or maybe you don't think of it split up 4 ways. But the point being that it's really hard for BART to come in with a substantial PDA project, or probably anybody to come in with a substantial PDA project when the funds are spread across the county. So I just ask that that be a consideration in the future, because if you really want to move the needle, you're going to have to put some substantial TOD projects in the works. And then finally, I apologize that I wasn't here on Monday. I intended to be, but I'm wondering if you could summarize some of the comments that you got on Monday afternoon as part of your outreach meeting.
So we held a scoping meeting on the SEIR on Monday, and it was lightly attended. I think only 5 people came. We have asked that everybody, if they have comments, that they submit them in writing. And so everyone has till September 1st to submit their comments. I think when we get those comments, we can publish them.
It's kind of a nitpicky semantics thing, but calling one of the alternatives the environmental alternative, is that kind of, I mean, if you lay out the alternatives and you're supposed to land on an environmentally superior one, I think it sort of presupposes you're going to land on the environmentally superior, the one called environmental focus. So I was wondering if maybe that shouldn't be reframed as maybe the specific environmental impacts that it, proposes to address.
Yeah, we've been grappling with that issue, because the implication is if you call one the community focus, option A, the community focus, that means that B and C don't have a community focus, and so, but we know we need a handle for these things, and so hopefully the names won't become too much of an issue. The results of the modeling in terms of what each of these do to vehicle miles traveled, that's going to tell the story. So I think we'll just wait and see. I don't think we've prejudged what the most environmentally, what's the term in the EIR? Superior, the environmentally superior option. We have not prejudged that by naming it environmental. If you would forward this to the planning committee, and I have a few comments here that I can carry forward. If you have specific concerns or comments, then please state them now. Otherwise, look for a motion to forward to the planning committee.
So moved.
No, this is to take to the planning. Martin would like us to approve taking it with the comments that he's received.
And abstain.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
It's your
I
right.
need to look at it and think about it before September comes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor? All opposed?
I abstain.
Oh. Ayes have it.